Well, well, well. Look at who it is. Me and or you. Because realistically, it's both. Don't know what rabbit hole my head was going down right there. We're back for another round of... There are a couple of names I'm just continuously rolling around with for this one. The Aha. Ask Hunter anything, but Aha, right? So it's like the play on the... No? Okay. And then the other one is the AM Yay. Right, like AMA, but celebrate like AM Yay, right? I didn't come up with that one. I did come up with the Aha one. But other people have been calling it the AM Yay. Q and Yay. That's what it is. It works for both, but I think Q and Yay is a little bit cleaner. Anyway, listen, we're here for the Q's and some of the Yays and a little bit of A. Okay, so first... What is something that you just recently realized that you were embarrassed that you didn't realize earlier? You know, it might be that there's a blood spot on my nose right here because I had a dry and it was itchy. That's not true. Please strike that from the record. What is something that you just recently realized that you were embarrassed you didn't realize earlier? You know, I don't have an answer for this. I wish I did because I think it happens pretty regularly. Like, I think fairly often when I'm streaming, we'll be having a conversation, just like a normal flow of like, just everything is on the table, like free flow, like all of human thought has the potential to be processed and just shoot its way out into the stream. And sometimes, and I know this happens with some frequency, sometimes a subject will just come up and I'll be like, hey Chad, did you know something I just found out recently? Did you know that XYZ works this way? And everybody's like, what? No! Well, maybe not everybody, but like at least two people, whether or not, I don't know if they're being authentic or if they're just like acting, going like, you gotta let Hunter feel like he really is onto something here. And like, oh my God, that's crazy. How wild. I don't know what direction that actually takes, but I think that actually happens pretty often. So it's like me recounting something that I recently just learned, and then I'm like excited to share with somebody, right? It's like, here's some fresh information I have that for the last 9 years I've been using this thing in a certain way, and I only just now realized that you can like, click this other button and the suddenly dark mode, and it's like, oh my God, my eyes have been getting seared out of my skull for, I don't know. I'm trying to think of anything that's like kind of close. I think everybody's figured out how dark mode works on anything now. What's something you could have done 10 years ago that you'd love to see the result of today? Oh, sweet Jesus. I also don't know if I have a good answer for this. What is this, a Q and Yay or a Q and oh? But potentially, hypothetically, could have started a family 10 years ago, and I would have loved to have seen what that would have been like. Maybe that's a question. What could you have done 20 years ago that you would have, liked to have seen what the outcome is today? And that might be family, not because I would have been happier having started that 20 years ago, but I would have been 19. Sweet Christmas. No, I don't think that would have been pleasant for me at the moment, in the moment. I would have grown into it, and then, much like with other parts of my life, something that's like a real extraordinary challenge at a certain time in my life. I don't have a lot of financial stability or really know what I'm doing, or have a career path or whatever. Like that's a very challenging time to have a family, and lots of people do it and then kind of grow into it, right? Where it's like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. This is why, and that's kind of just starting a family at any time. But you kind of learn the ropes, and you just kind of automatically sort of start figuring out some amount of balance. Not that you have your stuff together at all. But that it's like less problematic, slightly less difficult than it could have been because you started working things in a certain way. You get into a rhythm, which can create its own sort of, downside in the way that patterns sort of start to emerge that we don't necessarily intentionally create, and then we sort of just fall into them. Creates its own set of difficulties and challenges. But I think that's also just like regular life, right? It has nothing to do with like family stuff, but the reason why I say the 10 years, then it was like, no, let's bring it to 20, is because, dealing with very small humans has like a lot of great joy. And then there's this kind of like middle realm where it's like, nobody, like, you don't like you, I don't like you, nobody really likes you. That sounds really harsh. Like, I'm not saying this to, a preteen or a teenager. I'm not actively going to, okay, most of the time I would not actively say that. I could definitely see myself getting potentially like, aggravated, just finding words showing up. That happens. But if I could just skip over to like the 20-year mark and be like, hey, look at that, congratulations, you grew up, and I'm so glad that I was able to help you achieve all of these various, in sundry aspects of your life that you enjoy so much. Now go out and have fun in the world, and then I've like got all the memories instead of having to like experience the thing. That also doesn't make sense. You know what? I take back every answer I'm going to give to like any Q&A ever. I've been refuting myself every step of the way here. Okay, alternatively, art. How long did I do art for? Better part of 6 years. I think it was 6 years. And I've been streaming for I've been streaming for longer than I made art. Whoa. Okay, right. So regardless, if I had, 7 years ago, it's more or less the same kind of time scale. If I had 7 years ago, 10 years ago, totally stuck with art making, I don't know that in terms of my life, I don't know if that stuff would be better, but it would be really cool to see how over that period of time, which would, I guess, amount to 13 years now, how over 13 years my artistic process would have changed and how my opinions and perspectives would have changed on things. And a lot of the growth, like technical growth, of course, it's like, oh, here's where I started out with stick figures, and even those were bad. And then it's like, ooh, and look at this, I actually drew this thigh really well. Everything else is garbage, but that thigh, that's a really nice, that's a good one. I made a good one right there. And then eventually, right, it's like, oh, look at you, I drew this cute goat from scratch without even a reference, and it just looks so neat. It's like watching the progression, which, just for the record, like that is peak high art, is like cute goats from scratch. I've put a lot of time into the research, and all of the results come out as cute goat. Good stuff. Best stuff. Goat of the year. I think I meant to say goat of all time. Can we edit that to have me say goat of all time? Yeah, anyway, that kind of sense of progression. And something that really, like, stands out in my head is something that I come back to regularly in conversation, which I think is very important because I don't necessarily come back to it regularly in my personal life as much as I would like. And so being able to share thoughts and like particularly like trajectories of thought with y'all, like when you ask questions like this, it helps me better myself, right? Because I get to think my way through certain things, either questions I haven't considered before or questions that I've thought about, 1,000 times over, but never formulated like through language what an answer would be. It's like when you think of a question in your head, sometimes you can just ruminate and the subconscious is playing things. There's like a little projector that's throwing just images up on the wall on the inside of the skull. It's like boom, 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 boom. And you're not really, it's like this whole unique experience like inside the mind, but it doesn't really necessarily like process it in a sort of analytical way, right? And when you're talking to somebody like right now, you want to be understood by somebody else, right? Somebody who maybe doesn't have the same perspective or knowledge or viewpoint, which I think is just another word for perspective, that you do, and you're trying to like find this common ground of like, let me make sure that I'm not using like too technical terms, like if you're speaking about something that you're an expert in, or let me make sure that I'm not too ambiguous, that I can be understood in a way that somebody who isn't me and doesn't think in the same way that I do and didn't just think about those 10 things right there in order to get to this conclusion, how would I phrase things so that somebody else knows where I'm coming from? That they don't have all the shortcuts that I just worked through in my own head. How do I get that information over there so that they can be thinking along the same lines, right? Like that sort of processing is incredibly valuable. So with things like this, I don't know, it helps me better myself when you ask me questions. It doesn't even have to be like the super vital and critical question, just asking a question, and then I go on a rant, which I've never done before. I'm doing it for the first time ever. That is incredibly valuable. It's really valuable. Like, you help me see myself. You know what I mean? Anyway, what was the point? 10 years ago. Oh, yes. Something that I come back to regularly in the conversations that we have together is that we have an opportunity in terms of past, present, and future self to do this really interesting, fascinating, and brilliant thing. All of us have this potential where we get to take a question like this, but instead of looking at now and like current me and past me, which is what this question is doing, right? Like what is something you could have done 10 years ago that you'd love to see the result of today? Take that same thing, and here's current me and here's past me, and instead do it like this. Whoop! Where here's current me and here's future me. So now future me is the one asking this question to, according to future me, past me. And it's like, what could you have done, past Hunter? Which is actually current Hunter, right? Because it's like 10 years in the future, that me is yelling back in time at me right now. And it's like, hey, past Hunter idiot. What? Yeah, here's the thing that I really wish you'd have done so that I could harvest all these beautiful results, right? You get to project that into the future by starting something right now, and I think this is such a beautiful and magical thing, because it gets, I wish that I knew what I know now when I was younger. Takes that and puts it in the future perspective, right? It like flips it around, flips the script a little bit. And gives you some control. Because when you look back to the past, you don't have any control over that. You can't do anything back there. All you can do is have the today thoughts, right? And maybe it's resentment. It's like, oh, dang, I really wish I had done that kind of a thing, right? It's like this wish that can never be fulfilled. Like, I wish that this other thing existed. That can't, it never will, because the past is locked in historically. It's back there. Time ain't gonna return over there. It keeps moving forward. Oh, but what if I flip it around and put it over to do the right? And then it's like, anyway, very fascinating. Love this kind of setup. So let me change this question up. What is something that I want to have 10 years from now, that I want to see the result of 10 years from now? I think one big one is something I've recently restarted, which is like spiritual practice. Like it's super fresh. Like I keep coming back to things throughout my life, and it's a bit of a roller coaster, right? It's like, I'm doing a bunch of like, really interesting and like deeply personal and spiritual things, and then it's like, I've got a bunch of other things that are taking priority, and then I swing back up and I'm like, oh, spiritual practice, hell yeah, feels so good. Nothing else in my life nails it quite the same way. And then it's like, oh, but all these, career, school's taken over, or like, oh, I've got this hobby that I really want to dive into this week, and then slowly but surely, you just give it enough time of a gap, enough of a time gap, and suddenly it's like I forget to do it for, several days in a row, and then it's kind of like off my radar a little bit, and I'm like, oh yeah, I can do it, but then it's just too far gone, you know what I mean? I'm like, oh, I get an anxiety about it. I'm like, yeah, but if I do it now, it's like admitting defeat about how I haven't done it for the last 2 weeks. It's like, well, yeah, but then you'd be doing the thing that you love so much. So anyway, got this renewed kind of spirit practice that I'm really digging, and I'm learning so much about it and about myself kind of every day, because it's like I was part of this daily and routine and habitual sort of practice that I'm engaged in, this engagement, this activity. And I'm adding new things in, like, frequently, as I'm sort of taking control over it, right? Like, younger me was more like, hey, what can everybody else show me about how this works? With any number of things. And I liked to think that I was self-directed and I was like really in control myself, but and for very good reason. I was just looking to other people to say like, hey, like, help me out. I need at least a little bit of a kickstart, a jump start here. He's like, get the battery running, and then I can do something with this. But now I'm like, at this stage in my life, I've sort of come to the realization that, don't take this the wrong way, but I mean this in terms of like, practice and identity. I can do anything that I want. I can be whoever I want. And if a certain spiritual practice, or anything sort of resonates better in a slightly different way than how everybody else is doing it, then that could be totally fine. I need to explore that and examine that in my own light, you know, through my own worldview and my own experiences, and the things that, you know, light me up and really invigorate me the most. Like, those are things that I want to build into what I do every day. That's where my day feels the most, you know, fulfilled and exciting. You know, and when I wake up in the morning, I want to be like, oh yeah, I got to hit the ground running today. I'm amped, just like nail this stuff out. And a lot of that, you know, that energy I have been noticing comes from sort of steering the ship, so to speak. You know, not like doing an appropriate amount of looking to outside sources, and then, you know, applying my own worldview and like critical thinking and analysis to it, and going like, you know, I see what they're doing there, and I don't quite agree. I don't quite, that doesn't really work for me. And instead of trying to like shoehorn myself, you know, like fit the, you know, round peg of me-ness, hunter-tude, into the, you know, triangular hole of whatever that other thing is, that got real awkward. You know, it's more like, I'm just gonna go find another place that fits really well, you know, and not a place like, I'm just gonna do my own thing. Like, I'm going to create my own shape and create my own place that I'm gonna fit into. And there it is. The perfect match is right there, because I made both parts of it. You know, metaphorically, I think that kind of stands up to the idea that I'm playing with here, of like that sense of having control over. It's not really like a power play, but the phrase that I keep coming back to is like steering, right? It's like steering the ship. Like, I get to captain my own ship. And that is, you know, some amount of power and some amount of control, but not really in a sort of dynamic where it's like me versus other people or me versus the world. I've gotten a little bit better, at least, of letting the rest of the world sort of fall away and just looking at what it is that matters to me and why. What are my values? How do I put those into play right now? Is that going to be better for the world and for me and for my day and for my cats and for my chat? You know, to really know what those values are, right? And like have my top tier values and be like, that's my vision and mission. That's what I want to do. How do I do that stuff better? How do I commit myself to that more? Are these things that I'm bringing into my life, do they help me do this more or better? Or are they fulfilling some other role? Or is it something completely different? You know, is there some other weird sort of psychology at play that's causing me to want to do this thing, even though it might not be very good for me? And I have to, you know, give myself some room and some space to be able to do that. And I think the spiritual practice sort of, and the way that I'm approaching it is something that's, you know, that's doing the right work for me. It feels correct. And I've been having a lot more energy and a lot more excitement, even though a lot of the things that have been plaguing me lately over the last few months and then also couple of years haven't necessarily changed in a huge way. You know, it's a perspective shift, and this could totally disappear tomorrow. You know, it's not like I perceive this as some like, you know, permanent change, but I feel like with the practice and continued commitment to it, that you know, this seems to be a result of it, and so I really want to kind of stick with that. And that's something that I'd really like to see what shape that takes, since I'm the one who's steering it, what shape that takes 10 years from now. You know what I mean? That's fascinating to me. That's something that's really got my attention, because again, right, it's not just me like following some predetermined plan and some step-by-step guide that I found in a pamphlet or whatever, which might work out actually perfectly great for some people. But that's not really my style or my jam. And so like, I'm constructing this myself and going like, you know what? Nobody I know, I've not heard of a single person doing this. This has nothing to do with like the practice as it is out in the world, but this really makes a lot of sense for me. And I'm just gonna add it in here. I'm crafting my own potion. You know what I mean? And it feels great. I really like it. So that's potentially an answer to that question. Can we get to question 3 now? That was like an average of 10 minutes per question. Per answer. Well, per answer of a question. Listen, if you were a mad scientist and money and ethics weren't an issue, what experiments would you run? You know, when I was starting out in university, yes, that time in university when I completely failed out of college, I was originally there were a couple of things I was kind of like tossing around, but the one that stood out the most to me was actually psychology and religion. It was more of, you know, like I was incredibly intrigued by the overlap of some this is coincidental that it just maybe it's not, maybe this is lining up perfectly as designed, because I mapped all this out in advance. I notably did not. That there was this interesting, it was an interesting time for an overlap between science and spirituality, which are, you know, typically seen as in conflict with each other. You know, like spirituality and or religion is completely irrational, which is somewhat true when it comes to the matters of faith. And science is profoundly rational, and therefore these two things are in conflict with each other. But that's like saying that art is in conflict with science, right? If we're speaking very broadly. Art has a rational element, but also has a profoundly irrational element. Like all of the creative acts have as an intrinsic part of that act of creation, of that creativity itself, is inherently irrational by necessity. It has to be. That doesn't remove it completely from the rational world, but there's, you know, because there can be a total logic to even something like color theory, right? It's like these are the things that we use, and we can sort of map it out and make some kind of an assessment. But at the end of the day, the act of creation itself is irrational, right? Like you can't so cleanly point to like a rational procession, a logical procession, I should say, from getting from these things inspired me to here's the creation, the truly, genuinely creative act. Anyway, I'm going to be sticking to the point, starting in 10 minutes once I end this video, okay? That's when we're going to start sticking to the point. I originally, gotta bring it back in here. I originally was going to essentially have a focus on psychology and Buddhism, and or sort of Buddhist adjacent elements of philosophy and religion. You know, so looking less at, you know, here are, you know, clinical diagnoses or psychological preconditions for, you know, some particular behavior to develop, or even more broadly, you know, why do we do the things that we do? Why and how, brain? I ask myself that most every day, not exclusively every day, but more about like, what is the seat of consciousness? How does consciousness arise in the brain from a physical apparatus that seems to be the thing that's directly connected to consciousness? Is the brain. Is that even true? Is that even accurate? And then, you know, other things that are like very deeply related to this, consciousness and soul. You know, and when it comes to Buddhism, like reincarnation. You know, not necessarily looking for, you know, can I get some like clinical verification that reincarnation is a real thing, and that in my past life I was a worm, my last one, and in my next one I'm also going to be a worm, because let's be real, I probably deserve exactly that. But I did some really good stuff in the last life as a worm in order to be able to deserve this one, because I got some great stuff happening right up in here. You know what I mean? Just thinking about like the delicious food that I get to eat sometimes, it's just like that's worth one lifetime, brief lifetime as a worm. I think that's pretty good. I mean, I probably even got a discounted rate to get up and, well, sticking to the point, right? I got this. If I were a mad scientist and money and ethics weren't an issue, what experiments would you run? I don't know what experiments I would run, but I know what their purpose would be, right? Like, that's the thing. I I do really desperately want to, I don't necessarily need an answer, but I desperately would have wanted to, or in this hypothetical, would want to go very deep in exploring, like, how, where, and why consciousness. Maybe a little bit of what consciousness. But not when consciousness. Actually, there is a really good, never mind. All of the basic questions are going to be covered by these experiments. And that's a thing that's like, get funding for that? Pff, please. No, it's not going to happen. Not particularly easily. Definitely, there is actually research that has been continuously going on related to these sorts of things. And the funding does come from somewhere. You got to pay people for their time. Like, that's the only way anything ever is going to get done when it comes to a career, right? And the only way you're ever going to get good science is by having career scientists. That money's got to come from somewhere. You got to be paying those people. So that does actually get funded. But if I didn't have to worry about funding, I would love to have, like, yeah, and we've seen it all. Usually it's super villain related, some way, somehow, in like shows and in movies and books and whatever, where it's like, oh, these people started out with this like really interesting approach, and they were like, it's like Hunter's Dharma Institute, how consciousness, and you know, we set up this, like, we got $3 trillion in funding. We were getting funded pretty big, and we set up this whole campus. In fact, we bought a small country, set up this whole campus. You know, we're importing some of the best scientists from all over the place, and you know, and we started doing the experiments, and then I don't know, you know, one of us opened up a portal to, like, opened up a hell mouth at some point, and then, like, you know, everything starts going absolutely AWOL, but nobody knows about it. Just like the upper echelons, right? It's like they report to me, because clearly I'm the one in charge, because that seems like a good idea. They report to me, and they're like, oh, we opened up a hellmouth, and I'm like, you want to make an omelet? You know what I'm saying? You gotta break some hellmouth eggs. And then lo and behold, it's like I'm opening up some, you know, continuously expanding portal that is also like a black hole, to accidentally let more demons in, because I'm like, oh, but we're so close to finding out where the source of consciousness is. We just got to go a little bit further, and then, like, you know, like 5 chapters later, like, I'm sitting there, you know, like completely fused with my seat, with like cables like growing out of me, like half my body's just like teeth, just something weird. It's like I have become the supervillain. Does that answer your question? If you were a mad scientist and money and ethics weren't an issue, what experiments would you run? I mean, it's an answer. Why do you hate Nutella? You know, I don't think I've had all that much Nutella. When I've had it with crepes. It was very good. Very good Nutella crepe. Delicious. I don't really know what you do with it. Because, like, if I want chocolate, I would get some chocolate. But it's like chocolate butter. I don't know. I mean, that sounds good. Nutella sounds great in theory, and I don't think I dislike it. I don't know why I hate Nutella. Do I hate Nutella? Hold on a second. If I'm getting gaslit here, who said I hated Nutella? Did I say I hate Nutella? I might have. When? Wait, what prompted this? When did this whole thing start in the first place? You know what? I think we got to get Snopes on this. Does Hunter hate Nutella? I don't know. How much wild can a HunterWild hunt? Seven. That's the end of it. Got them all. Thank you so very much for the opportunity and encouragement to search through my own mind and heart and soul to answer some of these questions. Even the super goofy ones. I love them, and I love you. All right, you're rock stars. You better be treating yourself that way, because you deserve it. And if you don't, well, I don't know what. But you know what? If you don't, maybe we'll have words. If you, that's my friend you're talking about. You better treat yourself with some respect. All right? And also, I have an incredibly deep appreciation for you. And the fact that we get to, you know, be on this bizarre, rocky life raft of a planet, hurtling through the, totally indifferent, cold void of space together. Maybe on the only planet, probably not, that has any life in the entirety of the universe. But as far as we know, that's true. And I get to spend this brief little moment with you. That's wonderful. It's delightful. You make that feel incredible. All right. Thanks for being a patron and or watching and or submitting questions every month. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. Thank you for being good to me. Good night. Good luck. What's up? Apodaptus. Apodaptus, you are like drinking an iced cherry Slurpee in the summer or having a cup of hot cocoa with marshmallows on top in the winter. Got it. So dumb. So dumb. So fucking dumb. You know what? Fuck A-Greens. We're going back a turn. Insult his mother. Hey, Greens! Your mother cooks poorly and is misshapen. That's all I can do. That's all I got. That's the best that I can do. It's so weird how the jump itself has to be hyper precise. When the attacks themselves, this seems like there's like such a bigger window. We salute you, Mycenians. Long live the Mycenians. It was a quick run, but it was a something. Oh my god. And because I became a vassal, the Nubians also became a vassal because they were my vassal. What's a vassal of a vassal? Oh, god damn it.
Is over.
Darkness before the dawn is over? Lady Q, come on. Oh, god damn it.